And so without further ado, I introduce to you our two speakers who are coming up to sit on these comfy chairs. And here you are at the Park Avenue Christian Church, and I just want to point out that we worship every Sunday at 11 a.m. with the liberationist message. I preach most Sundays. And there are churches all over New York City that are filled with the very people who preach a message that is not of liberation. And so I invite you to come and join us, to give to the church, to offer your support in whatever way you can. But that's not the main message here. The main message is to prepare ourselves for the people who are coming up to sit in these two chairs. And I want to introduce Carmen Perez, who will introduce Cyntoia Brown Long. And Carmen, you may notice where this church sits. So we're sitting here on the corner of 85th and Park Avenue, and maybe you have an understanding of what that means for me as a pastor, but when we faced the moment in 2016, the first person I called in November of 2016 was Carmen. And she and I sat down, please take your seats. She and I sat down to think through what would be next for us, for the city, and how we could work together. And Carmen has dedicated her 20-year career to advocating for many of today's important civil rights issues, even when it's inconvenient, even when she might be called out for it or said that she shouldn't have taken that stance. Carmen has still been willing to stand on the side of truth and righteousness on issues like mass incarceration, gender equity, violence prevention, racial healing, and community policing. She is the co-founder of Justice League New York City and founder of Justice League California. And those two are not quite as far apart as you might think. But these are two state-based task forces for advancing a juvenile and criminal justice reform agenda. And she was one of the national co-chairs of the Women's March on Washington, which drew over, I don't know, something like 5 million people across the globe. In addition to being named one of Fortune's top 50 world leaders and one of Time's 100 most influential people, Carmen has also been a featured speaker in all kinds of hallowed institutions I won't even try to name. It is our great honor to welcome Carmen and our sister Cyntoia Brown Long, who we are so delighted to hear from today. And we also acknowledge that somewhere in the house we have 13-month-old baby Justice.
What's up, everyone? Well, first of all, welcome. Welcome home. I'm not used to the mic being so close. I'm used to being like this, but I want to just say thank you for being so courageous and telling your story, for humanizing what so many young women and girls go through every single day of their lives, and for being audacious in taking a stand. And so please join me in a round of applause to welcome home Cyntoia. Come on, we could do better. That's right. That's right. I also want to take the time to thank Girls for Gender Equity, Ladies of Hope Ministries, Until Freedom, the Beyond the Box Initiative at Columbia University for your partnership in this event. Thank you to Roland Martin and Black Public Media. I also want to give a shout out to our beautiful sisters who just read from Cyntoia's book tonight, Andrea, Aaliyah, Leah, Vinay, Jamila, and Tamika, as well as our youth and engagement coordinator, Luis Hernandez, for giving a rundown of what we do at the Gathering for Justice. And finally, a big, big thank you to Kaji and the Park Avenue Christian Church. Thank you so, so, so much. I've actually been dreaming about this interview. I have been reading the book. I've been listening to Cyntoia's beautiful, soft voice on the audiobook. I have to say that I feel like I've gone through a journey with you for the past couple of weeks. And so before we start, I just want to take a moment to again welcome you home and to say to you, I see you, we see you. I did read, when I first picked up the book, the first thing that I read on here is a message to young people in the juvenile justice system. It says, this book is dedicated to all the women, men, and especially juveniles serving time in the American prison system. May you have lost all hope and feel like your voice has been silenced and your life doesn't matter. Know that there's one person who sees you. And it reminds me of the first time I met my husband, and he had said something like sawabona, and that is Swahili for I see you. And that always stuck with me because I think what we always want to have or what we want in our lives is to be seen, to be recognized, and we also want to belong. So I see you, we see you, and I also know that it's November 14th, and you've been home for 2 months. 3 months, yes. So could you please just share with all of us of what does freedom taste like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like?
Freedom, it's amazing. As you said, you know, it's sitting in my own home. I know one of the ladies had read an excerpt about the most thing that excited me was walking in and I had all the cleaning products that I could think of because, you know, in prison you clean with water. But it's having those choices, it's having that power to determine what you want to do with your life, and you don't have all these obstacles in your way. You can just live. You don't have to go every day feeling trapped, feeling powerless, every single day, just your basic rights just denied. That's freedom, and sometimes it's just sitting on your floor with a plate of food in front of you.
Yeah.
But it's been incredible, and it's a blessing to be able to do what I'm doing now, to not only have me to be seen, but the other people that I've left behind, because so often our voices are taken from us. No one wants to hear from us, and there are people who actively work to make sure that no one can hear from us. So, you know, for me, that's freedom, is that I can speak on these things, and there's nobody here to stop me.
Was there anyone in particular that you felt while you were inside that had your back? Did you develop a strong friendship with somebody? I think oftentimes I know that people who have served time, and I know that some of our family members who are here have done time in prison. And so you feel this responsibility to also advocate for them. But was there anyone in particular that you felt you got really close to while you were inside and who you want to bring into this room?
You know, in terms of the women that I was incarcerated with, there were women who I got close to, women who, when I was just getting into the prison and didn't know how I was going to navigate prison life, didn't know how I was going to do all the time that they said I was going to do, I really looked to these women as role models. They showed me how, you know, you can do this time and not let the time do you. Mm-hmm. And so women like Erica East, who is still in a Tennessee prison serving 51 years for defending herself against her abusive husband, she's the one that showed me how you can educate yourself there in prison, how you can be positive every day, but she's still sitting there. There are other women like her, Taronda Williams. I can go on and on about the women that I really took to and I became close to, and every day I carry them with me. I wrote that in my acknowledgments. I carry those ladies with me because they deserve a second chance as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of course. Your story, I think, touches so many of us on many levels. Tonight, I want to dig deeper into the system, something that I have become familiar with one. I've had somebody in my life who's formerly incarcerated. I've had family members. My husband is formerly incarcerated, but I've also understood the other side, creating alternatives to incarceration for young women, and then ultimately becoming a probation officer. And I know that oftentimes probation officers enter the system wanting to help, and then they also get caught up in the system. But what do you think could have been, in your early years, what could have been something that could have avoided you getting deeper involved in the system? What could have been some of the services that either could have been done from your community or your church, or what were things that you needed as a young woman?
You know, I can go back as far as being in elementary school when I started presenting with, you know, behavioral issues. My mother would be called up to the school to take me home for suspension, but when she asked what could she do, she didn't get referred to behavioral health specialists. She didn't get referred to counselors or anything like that. It was just always easier for the school system to just write me off and get rid of me, remove me from the learning environment. There wasn't any real focus on helping me to thrive within that learning environment. So I really felt like I was cast aside.
That's right.
And going on to me being in the system at a young age, the first time when I went into juvenile facilities, there was a lot of medication being shoved down my throat, but they didn't do much to teach me how to cope with what was going on. They didn't do much to help me understand the feelings that were going on within me, because it was just easier to prescribe me something, right? And they didn't work with my mother. Again, she was asking for answers. She was asking for help. There was no resources being given to her. When I was released from state custody, there was 30 days that I had a mentor who would work with me and other aftercare services, but after that 30 days, that was it. It was done. So there was a lot that can be done. I know Governor Haslam, whenever I had the chance to sit with him at a dinner a few weeks ago, he had said that he wished that he had read this book when he was still in office, because there were so many times that I had contact with the state where they had failed to intervene, and the opportunity was there. So much could have been done, and I'm sure that you'll see that as you read the book.
And I think that's important for people who work on juvenile justice reform to understand that oftentimes we recognize that young people are not able to receive the services that they need while they're in school, and so they ultimately get pushed out, right? So they get pushed out of their school, and they get pushed into a justice system that does not serve them. Right. So thank you for that. I also want to say that the moment I heard your story, I thought about every young girl who was on my caseload. And that's just me when I was able to see some of your interviews. But when I actually read your story, I began to realize that you were every young girl that I grew up with, including myself. And when you and I spoke for the first time, I had said to you that I did not realize, it wasn't until I read your book that I realized that some of the things that my friends and I had experienced were inappropriate. Never did we talked about adults or older kids introducing us to different things, and so what are some of the things, I know that you talked about writing this book for young girls and wanting them to recognize that maybe this book could actually help them. What are some, how can we help young girls experiencing these type of things understand that they are being taken advantage of?
You know, I think it comes with having those conversations. The first time I ever experienced an older man having an inappropriate relationship with a young girl, it was my 6th grade teacher, my math teacher, Mr. Troxel, and I would see the girl, who was actually my best friend's sister, come into the classroom every day. He would stop class to go over to his desk and have moments with her, and then months later, I was in the car with my mother, and the Tom Joyner radio show had come on, and it was a news break, and they were saying that he had been arrested. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, what was that about? And, you know, my mother had explained to me about him being caught with her in a compromising position, but when I went back to school, there was no conversation about it. We had guidance counselors, but they didn't come have a conversation with us. They didn't let us know that it was inappropriate. It was kind of just okay, and people just turned away. And so in my mind, it was like, well, maybe this isn't such a bad thing. Maybe my mother is just overreacting. I think at that age, you often think that your parents overreact about a lot of things. But no one ever really addressed that. And I was 12 years old, and more adult men would say inappropriate things to me, and it really wasn't addressed, that it was not okay, that it was inappropriate. So I think it comes with having that conversation that it's not okay, making sure that young girls understand that, you know, having an older boyfriend, that's not normal, and it's not healthy, and he's not your boyfriend. He's someone who's taking advantage of you.
What you did say that in the book. You had talked, you know, and we're going to be selling books later, so I just want you to know that you're going to have your chance to buy one. But I know that in the book you talked about you being developed early, and that there was, I'm not sure if he was a cousin, but somebody looking at you a certain way. Of your father's friend. But what I also feel is not only should we be having these conversations with young women, but we also need to be having them and addressing the men that are doing these things, right? I think you felt as though nobody had addressed him. You had felt as though, okay, this is the moment somebody's going to say something, and no one ever did. And so how can we call that out, right? How could we, when we see something like that, I mean, because all of us have seen it, right? What are...
Say something. Don't just, I think a lot of times, you know, we get in each other's business for the wrong things, but when it comes to the times when we should be getting in other people's business, then we don't say anything. We'll see a situation like that, and we kind of just like, well, that's none of my business. But you know, that is your business. That's a young person. That's a child, and we all need to take responsibility for young people. And whenever, you know, I had really just sat back and looked over things, I thought back to all the older people who just allowed me to think it was okay for me to go with all these older men. What if somebody had told me this is not okay while I was doing it, while I was in the midst of that? What if someone had said something to that man, you know, you're sick, this isn't okay? But no one ever did that. They encouraged it, or they just looked away, and they called me fast. They called me promiscuous, and I believed it.
And those were the labels that you were talking about, right? Consistently being labeled. And I think, you know, I know that your spirituality and faith, for which, for anyone who hasn't read the book, plays a significant role in your life. And we're currently in a church, so what a perfect place to have it. At what point did you find yourself leaning towards God?
So I had always been raised in the church. I was raised in the Missionary Baptist Church. My mother took me to church every Sunday and Wednesday, and I learned about religion. So whenever I first got my time, well, actually whenever I first got arrested and I was facing transfer, I would pray every single day, because I'd remembered that the Bible said, you know, anything you ask in my name, it shall be given to you. So I said, okay, if I pray every single day, please, Lord, don't let me get transferred in Jesus' name. Then I'm not going to get transferred. Well, then I got transferred. And one of the volunteers had brought me a little mustard seed. And I said, well, you know, if I had the faith of a mustard seed, it said that mountains can move. So I know that if I had the faith of this mustard seed, that this situation can go away. And so I would squeeze that little mustard seed every day and pray with everything in me that I not be given a life sentence, that I not be transferred. Whenever I was sitting in the county jail, I would sit and look at that mustard seed thinking, well, I got transferred, so I must not be doing something right. Maybe I need to plant this. And so I remember planting it in a medicine cup from one of the med calls. That didn't work out either. I think everyone knows I got sentenced to life, and so I just really had a moment, you know, where as she read, I said, God, if you get me out of here, You know, I'll tell the world about you. I'll do anything. And years would pass, and appeal after appeal was denied, and I started thinking, well, maybe no one's listening to me. All this time, I believed there was someone who was listening, but maybe there's no one up there. And as you'll read in the book, something happened. God started speaking to me. And it took me for a moment, because I was like, wow, this is kind of like what I read with what happened with Joseph in the Bible. And now it's happening to me. I'm dreaming things and they're actually coming to pass. I can't explain that. I had spent all these years before trying to explain things through rational means, trying to find some explanation for everything that I saw. And I couldn't explain this. So I knew that God was speaking to me. I knew he had to see me, but I still couldn't understand why this had been allowed to happen to me, why I had been given this life sentence. And then I met my husband.
Who's here with us?
He is.
Yes.
And whenever Jamie had first wrote me, this was a time when every single one of my appeals had been denied. And the only thing left was clemency. And there was a slim to none chance of my petition even being seen by the parole board, much less the governor. And when he wrote me, he said, you know, God said to tell you that he's bigger than any sentence, any judge, and any jury. And it was so prophetic what he said in this letter. He said that the more people hear about your story, the more they're going to pray for you. Wow. And at the end of the letter, he had wrote, #free Cyntoia 2017. And this is in January, way before anybody was ever thinking about Cyntoia or a hashtag. And so months later, you know, we started having a conversation about faith. And his faith is just crazy, you know, and I love him for that. That's one of the things I love most about him. And it made me think, you know, what happened to my faith when I was squeezing that mustard seed thinking that, you know, this is going to come to pass. And, you know, he challenged me. He said, what if you just tried Jesus? Not a religion, but a relationship with him. What if you actually got to know him, read the Gospels, get to know him, see how his life is much like what you're going through right now. See what he has to say about it. And so I did. And I started focusing on him, and I started seeing that doors just started opening. The appeal that was denied, that the judge said was dismissed, and he wouldn't issue a certificate of appealability, all of a sudden opened up. And I was able to appeal it, and that's unheard of in federal appeals. And after that, we were working on my clemency application. And he said, let's try something different. Instead of you stressing and making all these phone calls, asking if this person can connect you with that person, why don't we just pray on it? Mm-hmm. Why don't we pray on every hand, eye, and ear that comes into contact with this petition? I said, okay. And that's what we did. And all of a sudden, it just started happening. Victims' rights advocates who never, in the state of Tennessee, I don't know about New York, but they never advocate for people going before the parole board. They always advocate for victims. They wrote me letters in support of my clemency application. They came to show up at the hearing. I had senators and legislators come in to support me, and I kept thinking back to where I was, where this all began, and it was like, wow, the Lord is literally moving mountains. Mm-hmm. And then everything happened with the hashtag stuff that happened literally overnight. And I got to see how nobody is beyond God. Right. Like he can touch literally anybody's heart. There were people from all across the world who were praying for me, sending me letters, and it was just incredible to see what he could do and to see what faith can do. And like you said, that played a big role in why I'm sitting here now. And, you know, I just thank God.
Yeah, I mean, amen to that. Yes. And what a beautiful thing that God placed your husband in your life to remind you of that, right? Through a letter. I know that recently in an interview that I was watching, somebody had asked you why you, and you had responded that you're not that special, that you were no different from any other young woman who were victims of an unjust system and ended up in prison without the benefit of celebrity attention and media awareness. Tell us why it's important to pay attention to young women and girls in the system. We have so many initiatives like the Black Boys and Men of Color initiatives that focus specifically on young men, but what are the initiatives that need to be created for young women? And why do we need to be paying attention, especially when there hasn't been much attention to young girls in the system?
You know, that's true, and I even remember being in the women's prison. We would always see like how in the men's prison, like, you know, they got treated differently, and there were so many more opportunities for the men and not so much for the women. I don't know why that is, but I know it's real, and I've seen it, and I've experienced, and I've lived it. I think a lot of times too, women aren't listened to when they're going through the system. I know that when I was going through my trial, no one wanted to hear my point of view. It was kind of just pushed to the side. My experience, you know, being a woman in this situation, it didn't count. It didn't matter. They saw facts that they wanted to see, and that was it. And there are several things, you know, such as hygiene supplies for women.
Right.
You know, like something that small makes such a big difference. Like, I can't explain to you, like, how belittling it is to be in a situation where you're forced to call home and beg for money so you can afford tampons each month because they're not provided to you, and you don't make enough there in the prison job to actually afford it. So there's things like that. It's just, I mean, it's degrading, it's dehumanizing, and I mean, there's so much room for improvement when it comes to young women and just women in general in this system.
So a lot of people assume your first injustice was being arrested, but what was your first experience where you felt the whole world was unjust for girls like you?
My first experience where I felt it was unjust. Where do I start? I think it goes back to the very first time when I found myself in juvenile court.
How old were you?
I was 12 years old. I was 12 years old. So as I had said, you know, the school just found it very convenient to just remove me from the learning environment. I would be sent to ISS and I would be suspended. Well, one time I got expelled. Well, I got expelled more than once. But the first time I got expelled, it was for a bottle of no-dose pills. And if you don't know what no-dose is, it's just a caffeine pill. You can get it at the store just like you can Tylenol or Dimetap. And my school, whenever I had it with me, just a show and tell, something I had found, they said that it was part of the zero tolerance policy, that it fell under that. And they completely banned me from public school. So that meant, that I had to go to alternative school. And in alternative school, you had kids who were much older than me. Most of them were 16, 17 years old. And a good majority of them had already been involved with the justice system. Many were on probation. And, you know, the rest of us were well on our way. So within 6 months of me being there, I had actually got my first charge with three of the people that I had actually gone to the school with. So whenever I went to court, I remember that it was like nobody was listening to me. I was the only one. The other three, there was two of the white boys and then a white girl there with me. I was the only one that had got time. I was the only one that was sent to a facility for an evaluation. And I had to spend 30 days in that facility. And it was the first time that I was ever away from my parents, from my home. And I just really started thinking like, wow, this doesn't seem fair, you know? Yeah. And no one wanted to listen to me. So that was the first time that I felt that just doesn't seem right.
I could feel what you're saying. So many times it's, you know, we put young people in a court and expect them to, expect them to navigate the system, but that's a whole different language. And then we put parents there, right? And I truly agree that it's important for us to begin thinking about wraparound services for the families and for specifically for girls. But I do want to ask one last question, then we're going to go into Q&A. Because you talk about your family, specifically your mom, who you call mommy. And I just love how much you love her. And you consistently talk about that in your interviews, in your book, how she always was for Cyntoia. Always. I wanted to know, and if you could share with the audience, just that special bond you have with your mom, and also other women who have been influential in your life.
Yeah, so, as you see in the book, whenever you get it, I spent a lot of time not listening to my mother, thinking she didn't know what she was talking about. I spent a lot of time on the run, thinking that my mother's home was the last place that I wanted to be because she was so strict and there were so many rules, and I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. But whenever I first got arrested, I realized that the people that I was running to, they were nowhere to be found. And she was the only one that was there for me. And she was consistent. Every other week, she would come visit me. She was constantly accepting my phone calls, even when it was super expensive. My mother's a teacher. She doesn't, make that much money, and Global Telling likes to take everything that you can for a phone call.
Right.
And she was always there for me, and in my lowest moments, she was always reminding me to pray, even when I didn't feel like praying. I didn't even know what praying could do for me in those moments, but she just encouraged me to pray. And she's still there for me. Yeah. For 15 years, she was there this whole time. But like you said, there were other women too. Mrs. Seabrooks, who I also mentioned in the book, who was in charge of the prison's education program, she's the one that gave me a chance to be in the college program that played such a big role in me just really just buckling down and deciding to do the right thing while I was in prison. And she had actually, held off picking the people for getting into the program because I wasn't eligible at the time. So she really pulled strings for me. But she was always there to mentor me. She gave me a job working in the education department, tutoring the other women. She would pull me into Jesus Calling meetings every single day, even when I didn't want to go, which I thank her for it now. So she was very, very, very helpful during that time, very supportive. Dr. Kate Watkins from Lipscomb University was there. She's still there. I was really blessed to have some amazing examples, some positive, healthy women in my life to support me, who were there for me, just really stood up for me.
That's amazing. One last one, I promise. So we just want to know, what are you working on now? What are you looking forward to in the future? And how can people support you?
So now I'm working on the book, really been traveling around, getting the word out about the book, and just every opportunity that I get to just share the experiences that I have, I'm here for it. I think that it's really important for, like I said, the women that I left behind and for other young girls so they don't get caught up in the system the way that I did. I'm also working with a group in Tennessee led by Senator Ramesh Akbari, who are working on changing legislation there that allows for people who were sentenced as adults who were juveniles at the time to get review of their sentence and become eligible for parole. So hopefully, this is the third year that we've tried it, so hopefully this year it'll get a little bit more traction, we're hopeful. Mm-hmm. And working with another group in Tennessee called Epic Girl. I mentor with them as part of my community service. They go into the juvenile facilities. There's a state-run facility, and then there's a high school, and then an office that I get to come in and tutor the girls with. But really, to be honest with you, just taking it a day at a time. Every day I would just wake up and I ask the Lord to lead me. My husband and I just try to keep our focus on Him, try not to get ahead of God. That hasn't worked out for me too many times in the past, so just taking it a day at a time.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. We're going to be taking Q&A, but yes, let's give a round of applause. It is free. It is free. Could, if you have a card with a question, please hand it to the end of the row. Just send it. My legs were chattering.
Like, I used to watch TV all the time, and my husband would tell me, he was like, girl, nobody watches TV out here. Like, you're not going to have time to watch TV. I'm like, yes, I will, but I really don't. I really don't. I like to watch makeup on the Instagram.
yeah.
Like, I'll sit there and watch makeup videos all day.
I like watching makeup, and I like watching food, like how to make food. So I feel you on that. Any other questions? Hey, girl. So this is a question from one of our partners, Tony. Let's see. What's up, Tony? Today, Girls for Gender Equity launched a campaign titled A National Agenda for Black Girls, where we are calling presidential candidates to center Black girls in the 2020 policy agenda. What issue or policy interesting in Black girls would you like to see centered in the 2020 election? Did I get it right? Okay.
I'd like to see what in terms of sentencing. Like, I think that's really important. I know that the president doesn't have really much to do with state sentencing, because each state has their own sentencing laws for state prisoners. I think it's great that they've been working a lot on federal laws, but I'd like to see what they could do to kind of encourage more states to kind of be, you know, more understanding about how much time they're giving people. I don't think they understand the concept of 51 years. I don't think they understand the concept of 25 years. If someone hasn't changed, hasn't been rehabilitated in 25 years, there's an issue with that. So just handing out these sentences like that, 50, 60-year sentences, it's unreasonable, it's excessive, and I'd like to think that, you know, our Constitution rules against it when it says that it forbids excessive punishment. So I'd like to see somebody who takes that to heart and tries to rally the states to change their own laws.
There are also some states that are no longer using fitness hearings, right?
For the transfer hearing?
For if you're fit to be in the juvenile justice, yes. If you could say a little bit more about that, you weren't provided that, right?
Right, so in the state of Tennessee, you actually, the DA has to file, so it's not an automatic transfer. There are several states, so if you are of a certain age and there are certain crimes that you're charged with, you automatically get transferred to be tried as an adult. So there is no such thing as a fitness hearing in those states. So there could be circumstances, there could be that this individual be better served by the juvenile justice system, whose aim is to remove the taint of criminality and actually treat individuals instead of punish. But they don't even get that opportunity. So I think that's really unfortunate. I think that we need to move toward transferring less individuals. I think that it's important that we start thinking about maybe a blended sentencing scheme, maybe a young adult justice system where if we have somebody who's 17 years old charged with a serious crime that requires more than 1 year that's left in the juvenile court jurisdiction, that there's more space to be able to work with that individual instead of just throwing them away and you know, locking them up as an adult. They're not adults. They're not little adults. They're children. So.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna combine two questions. One is, what would the adult Cyntoia say to the 16-year-old Cyntoia? So And the other question was very similar. Is there anything you know now that you wish you knew and believed while you were incarcerated?
So adult me would definitely say, you know, you don't have to live your life for other people. You don't have to, and I say that in a way like you don't have to live for other people's acceptance. Mm-hmm. You don't have to always change who you are and try to mold who you are so that you fit into what somebody else deems as acceptable, so that you belong. I tell her that, you know, Jesus loves you just as you are. He created you the way you are for a purpose, and you're perfect just the way that you are. As far as me being in prison, what I would tell to the person that I was in prison, I definitely let myself know that that voice that keeps telling me that I wasn't going to do life in prison, that was God all along speaking to me. And I wish that I would have had that faith that, you know, Jamie helped me to develop in those last 2 years. I wish I would have had that faith all along, because it was just incredible actually having a front row seat and seeing God work, seeing his hand. I can't even explain to you just how amazed that I was actually getting to see the things that I read about in the Bible, to see that actually happen and play out in real life. So I wish I would have been able to see life through that lens a lot sooner.
That's just beautiful. My father-in-law he says he's an old country preacher. So I hear a lot about the power of God, and my mother as well. They pray a lot, yeah. So thank you, just because a lot of the work that we do within the Gathering for Justice, we incorporate spirituality, and we always invite the Spirit to come in. So somebody asked, thank you for sharing your story. What can we do as people who read your book to help support the work that you do?
You know, to be honest with you, like the work that I do, it's about having conversations with one another, encouraging one another to actually do something about these things that we see. So right here in your own state, when you see that certain laws aren't right, like learn about policy, learn about legislation, sponsor your, like, you know, find a sponsor to draft your own bill, try to get these things changed, like make phone calls, learn how you can actually be a part of the solution. It's great to talk about things, it's great to have dialogue and to use social media to bring awareness, but you know, learn how you can actually harness all of that energy in a way that's productive to actually creating change.
Someone asked, are there any plans for you to travel for fun?
We do have plans for the holidays. So, like for me, fun, like it's, when I tell you, I just would rather just be in the house somewhere with a good plate of food, something good on TV, and my husband by my side. So we'll be with family for the holidays.
So what did you tell yourself when you felt like the world was against you?
Oh, that was a rough time, and that was more so when I was going through the trial process, when I was going through, you know, the transfer process. The media, like, it was saying like the worst things about me. I remember looking at the television screen one day. It was right after it had been announced that I'd be tried as an adult, and the DA was on the screen, and he said, you know, she's dangerous, and the public needs to be protected far more than anything we can do for her. And it was like he was saying, you know, just throw away. Like, we don't have time to deal with that. It's just not worth it. And I really felt like I had been wrote off and I had just been thrown away my entire life. And, you know, I kind of absorbed all that. I felt really low about myself. And it was actually starting Lipscomb, starting classes through that college course where these were people who saw something in me worth salvaging. They saw that, you know, I was worth the time and the investment. And it was just incredible. And I held on to that. And I saw that I was able to thrive. I saw that I had potential. I saw that you know, there is something in me worth salvaging. And just because somebody else doesn't see it, like, that's their problem, not mine. And that's really how I worked through that.
I know that, oh, go ahead. I know that you've been telling your story a lot, and you know, you sharing so much about you. You know, one of the things that somebody asked is like, what does Cyntoia's life look like in 10 years?
I don't know what my life looks like in 10 minutes.
I think about that too. I'm like, man, I don't even know. How much more time do we have for questions? One more question. Okay. So this is from a school social worker who says, I'm a school social worker for high school students. You mentioned you didn't receive the support in school by a counselor or behavioral specialist. How would you have liked to have been supported in school, or what would have been helpful then?
You know, I was a kid. I didn't know what was going on with me. Now I can look back and I can see it was the things that, you know, made me feel that I didn't belong, that I wasn't accepted. There should have been adults who understood that, and adults who were able to help me understand that. There should have been adults who could help my mother understand that when she was coming to the school, like, you know, what can I do and what's going on? I remember she was always asking me, and I didn't know, just as she didn't know. I didn't know why I couldn't go to school and learn like everybody else. Like, I tried, but I didn't know what was going on with me. And I really feel like every person that works with children in school settings or anywhere, daycare, anywhere, we should all be, you know, behavioral health specialists to some degree. We should all help them not just learn math and English, but, you know, help them to grow emotionally and mentally and learn how to navigate all those things, because that's a big part of who they are that's developing during that time. And it's just as important as arithmetic.
And I will just add to what you're saying, we should also remove any type of zero tolerance in our schools that does not serve any of the students that go to these schools. So I want to just thank you again, and I want to have all of us give Cyntoia Brown Long a round of applause for her courage and for bringing the story to us. You got a standing ovation, you get that often, huh? So we're going to get to, Cyntoia's going to be signing some books and selling them as well, but I want to recognize, again, our partners and just share a little bit, as you were talking about, what are some resources, what are some services that are in the community. I know here in New York, we have Girls for Gender Equity, that is an intergenerational advocacy organization committed to the physical, psychological, social, and economic development of girls and women through youth organizing, leadership development, and community building for gender and racial equity. GGE challenges structural forces, racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, economic inequity that work to constrict the freedom, full expression, and rights of trans and cis girls and young women and gender nonconforming youth of color. So you could support them by visiting their website, ggenyc.org. Let's give it up for them. Ladies of Hope Ministries is dedicated to helping disenfranchised and marginalized women and girls transition back into society through resources and access to high-quality education, entrepreneurship, spiritual empowerment, advocacy, and housing. This includes Hope House NYC, a safe house space in the Bronx for single women returning to New York City from state and federal incarceration. You can learn more about them at THELOHM.org or text capital LOHM to 71777 to support their critical work. And Beyond the Box is an initiative to remove barriers to education for formerly incarcerated people and provide a support system for prospective and current students who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. There's an old African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child, and Beyond the Box does this work with the help of the community. Therefore, they are always looking for more passionate volunteers and donors, particularly small amount recurring donations. which will help sustain the work. And if you would like to volunteer, please contact them at beyondtheboxinitiative@gmail.com. And of course, the Gathering for Justice, one of our initiatives that we will be launching hopefully soon, is the Patricia Perez Young Women's Leadership Institute, which is in the memory of my sister, who was killed at the age of 18 right before her 19th birthday and was buried on my 17th. And so that will be a place where we funnel young women to actually thrive and to learn and to build. And so we want to do something special for you. We're going to be closing, and so at this time, I would like to invite everyone who has been incarcerated or has been impacted by incarceration to come up to the stage so that we could honor you and thank you for continuously showing up for those of us who advocate on your behalf. And so we have... So again, we want to thank you, and we want to honor all of you. And so those of you who have been impacted, have been incarcerated, we're going to give you flowers, and we're going to have Cyntoia go to the reception area where she's going to be signing books. And again, thank you.
Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin, and don't forget to turn on your notifications. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? youtube.com/Roland S. Martin, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it just messes me up every single time. So, I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is Cyntoia, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
Martin.